You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello and welcome to this episode of Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest this week, Lyn Penman, who is founder and CEO of Mental Wellbeing Solutions. This is a dynamic company that's looking at new ways to manage mental health, and it's something I'm always interested in. As those of you who know me will know that fitness and activity for people with mental health conditions is one of my specialisms. So this is going to be really interesting. Now, Lyn is a clinical psychotherapist, and she's actually trademarked and has a book, details will be in the episode information, about her mental health management method called the Now Step. And it kind of comes away from the mould of traditional therapy, which means she's much more about solution focused, so more about the now than the past, which is, again, something I think for a lot of people is a really, really positive approach. Lyn's worked with a lot of major companies, and again, all the information will be in her bio on the episode, but she also has a membership which she runs helping people with anxiety and stress and mental health. So, Lyn, tell us a little bit about you, and then we will crack on.
Well, thank you for having me, and hello to all your listeners. It's really nice to be here talking to you all today. So, yes, Sarah, you pretty much said it all there in the introduction. I have had my own personal journey with anxiety and mental health 12 years ago when I was in a really dark place, and subsequently have went on to, I used to be a midwife as well many moons ago, but I went on to retrain in mental health so I could then support other people with all the things that helped me, because when I was going through my really difficult phase, I tried all the traditional kind of like therapies that take you back over your past and try to find a solution in your past, and they never ever made me feel any better. So I have now brought together all the things that I have learned in the Now Step, which is about teaching people how to be present and how to manage their mind to be in that present moment. So yeah, I have got 4 kids, I have got 2 little doggies, and yeah, live in Scotland, as you'll probably hear from the accent.
Which is brilliant. So we are talking predominantly about stress. Stress and anxiety are kind of, they're sort of vaguely 2 sides of a similar coin, shall we say. I mean, there are a lot of similarities and there are a lot of differences. But when we talk about stress, you know, I've always thought we need a certain amount of stress in our life. It's what drives us, it's what motivates us sometimes, it's what gets us out of bed in the morning. But it's when there's too much or we don't have the resources to cope, isn't it, that we do? So just very briefly, when we talk about stress, how would you describe that?
Okay, I think people have got a misconception because we're brought up in a society that leads us to believe that it's events. Oh, you're getting married, you're going to be really stressed. Oh, you're moving house, you're going to get really stressed. Oh, you're having a baby, oh, what a stressful time you're going through. But it's not, Sarah, actually events that cause us stress. It's a relationship or the lack of relationship that we have got with that, I call it the crazy lady voice, that's the name of mine, but that crazy lady or that crazy man voice inside your head that comes from the subconscious, it comes from your experiences, your past experience as a child. And it's that voice inside your head, the worries, the judgments, the criticisms, the negative self-talk, that is what fills your stress bucket, and that's what causes the problems. That's why you might know people, and your listeners will know somebody that can go and get married or can book a holiday or have really things coming up like Christmas, yet they're not that fazed by it. And it's not because they deal with stress any better. It's just that they've got a better relationship with that voice inside their head.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a quote I use. I'm not sure if I'm quoting it exactly, and I can't remember who it's from, but it's, nothing's ever good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And it's
absolutely,
it's the way we think about these things, isn't it? And like you say, there'll be people who seem to sail through what you'd be thinking, oh my God, that must be so stressful. And they go, well, not really. And it is our approach, isn't it? So what makes your approach different then?
My approach, like you said, my approach is solution focused. So it's not like I'm not interested in anybody's past. When people come to work one-to-one with me or in my membership of my groups, we've all got a past. We've all got a story to tell. Like I've been through a really bad divorce. My dad died when I was really young. Like I have had my experiences as well. But when we sit and talk about the problem, right, the brain takes us back. Like our brains are really, really clever, but in a way they're actually really, really stupid. So our brains take us back to that place where we actually were that 8-year-old that was getting bullied, or that 10-year-old when our parents were separating. And when we go through situations like that, what happens then is, because we're then having more thoughts about the situation, we're filling that stress bucket again. So we come back stuck in the cycle of stuck stress and stuck anxiety. So my whole method is about teaching people how to manage thoughts and thinking inside their head, and how they can bring themselves back to being that true version of themselves, that, if you like, that I talk about the infinite, that kind of like little infinite that was born before we realised all these grooves and these kind of experiences and all these bad things around about us that have caused us to then have this negative voice that's continuously sitting on our shoulder when we go through the day. So my whole method is about teaching people solution focused and rapid relief techniques to manage stress and manage anxiety, because to me, my personal and professional experience is that solution focus and rapid relief techniques are the number one way to manage stress and anxiety. Nothing else.
But it's so true, isn't it? It's, the more we think about the past, and I'm not saying that some people don't need to go back and resolve the past and things like that, but sometimes it just keeps the cycle going.
I am saying that. But I am saying that.
It does help some people, but and again, it's horses for courses, isn't it? But I think sometimes the more we dwell on things, the more we kind of just keep reiterating them. It's like you're just making the same thought patterns over again, the same mistakes over again. And, and again, I think stress and anxiety have got such a bad name. It's like, oh, it's bad or whatever. And, there are times where a little bit of anxiety might actually be a good thing. It's normal. Anxiety is a normal emotion. It's how we react to it and how we deal with it. And if you've got to walk along a very dark street in the middle of the night, you might be anxious about that and think, actually, this is not a good thing for me to do. I'm going to find a solution. I'm going to walk a different way. I'll get a cab or something like that. So sometimes the anxiety is actually our brain saying, not a good idea. Let's look around this. Whereas other times we are catastrophizing or we're building something up that we don't need to. And I think this is where you talk about normal and stuck.
There's a big massive difference.
Yeah, so
a big difference.
Talk a little bit then about the difference between normal anxiety or normal stress and stuck anxiety and stuck stress.
Okay. So the two differences are, like you mentioned there, right? Anxiety is a normal response. So just like we don't suddenly start laughing and be happy for 2 days at a time, similarly, we shouldn't be doing the same with anxiety, all right? We should be able, like you say, to be walking along a street, hear a noise in the dark and get a fright and think, oh my goodness, I better start running quicker to get back to my house. But then the minute we get home, we're able to switch then back into that joy or that contentment or whatever that be. But the problem is when people start to notice anxiety, and then we've got two parts of our brain, Sarah, if you think about it, that we operate from. So right now, you and I are using our intellectual left prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain that doesn't do stress and anxiety, right? It's the part that's really calm, really confident. It's the part that we all want to be operating from. It's the part that I operate from. However, we've all got our limbic primitive brains, like you just said there, in regards to the fact that it's there. Its job is to keep us safe. It's its only job. Now, this part of the brain, and this blows my mind every time that I think about it or say it, but that part of our brain has been there since we were reptiles, before we even came onto land, before we turned into monkeys. So we're trying to operate right now with a part of our brain that's never changed in all these billions of years, which actually works exactly the same as it did way back then. So what happens is people start to get anxiety, and then rather than recognising it as a normal emotion, they start to question it, and they start to wake up every morning scanning the environment, scanning their body for, why is my heart racing? Now, your heart's maybe racing because you've just been out and done a quick walk, or why am I getting tingling sensations in my face? Why am I feeling anxious about going out to the football, to take my kids to the football? So what starts to happen is you start to get stuck in this limbic primitive part of the brain, where we know that it shows up as negative and obsessional thinking. So again, it starts to become a loop cycle. The more you start to be in that limbic part of the brain, the more neural connections, the more the stress bucket fills, And people then start to become stressed about stress. They start to become anxious about being anxious.
Yes.
They're not stressed about Christmas. They're actually stressed about how stressed they're going to be at the Christmas parties when their mother-in-law arrives for Christmas dinner. Same with anxiety. The amount of people that work with me that they think they've got social anxiety, or they think they've got anxiety about going into the supermarket, or they've not about driving. It's the fact that they've been focusing so much on this feeling of anxiety that they're actually staring it in the face every day. They're looking for it. And they've become anxious about being anxious. So that's the difference between stuck and normal anxiety. One should come and go. The other one starts to stay in your life all day, every day, and cause you problems.
It's really interesting, actually, because it's something I do talk about on the course that I do with fitness professionals, is that for a lot of people, anxiety is a habit. And it's your brain becomes so used to being anxious that it goes to anxiety out of habit. Brains, like you say, brains are very clever, they're very stupid, but they're also very lazy. So they will go with the easy option. So if you're always getting anxious about things, that's where your brain will go, because you're doing that, and it's breaking that loop, isn't it? It's breaking that connection.
Absolutely, which is not an easy thing for people to do. People often think, okay, I'll read a book or I'll go and do like a couple of yoga classes, or it's not about that. It's about like there's so many different layers to managing your mental health, and there's so many different tools that people need to learn. So I often say to people, right, managing mental health is like, we're all in the mental health spectrum somewhere, regardless of where we feel we are. So obviously, like right now, I'm in the nice calm and green area, but 12 years ago, I was very much away up in that red tip in the scale. We're all somewhere there. We all need support. So managing our mental health, the approach for it has got to change. It's got to massively change, because everybody needs help right now. But people often think, okay, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to go to a yoga class. It's not as easy as that. Like, we really need accountability. We need the right support. We need the right tools and techniques to manage this crazy life that we're all leading right now, because life's pretty much like a really, really stormy sea, Sarah. And what happens is when you're operating from that primitive part of your brain, where indeed depression, OCD, bulimia, all the different things that are related with mental health show up, because they're stored inside a part of your brain in there. When we're operating from that part of our brain, it's almost like we're getting thrown into the sea off a boat, and we're drowning, we're sinking. But when you start to learn how to manage your mind, how to have intellectual mind control, how to improve your sleep, which helps empty your stress bucket, and you've got if you like, a toolbox of tools and techniques, it's like having a life jacket on.
Right.
So when you get thrown overboard, you're still kicking your little legs like mad, but you know what? You're going to stay afloat.
Because you've got the life jacket.
That's, to me, is the biggest difference right now.
Yeah, so you've got your life jacket, but you've also got the whistle, and you've got the light as well, which are all parts of that protecting or whatever. It's something, obviously, this podcast is very much focused on everyday activity, creating an active life. And interestingly, I think one of the things we'd sort of mentioned, which has sort of come up in when we were discussing this before, is that stress and anxiety can contribute to low levels of activity. And we know that activity is, I mean, it's a good thing to do for physical and mental health, but how do stress and anxiety contribute to lower levels of activity when we know it's a positive thing?
Absolutely, because again, when people are operating from that primitive limbic part of their brain, and they go to their GP, and the GP says, oh, you should be exercising more, or they're looking at stuff on social media that's saying to them, oh, exercise is the best thing because it gives you your happy hormones and dopamine and blah, 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 blah. People are in that part of their brain that's negative, right? The primitive part of the brain is negative, right? It makes them see things from the worst case scenario. So the thought of starting to go out for a walk or go to the gym, they're always going to have that voice inside their head saying, oh no, don't bother, you're too overweight, or your back's too sore, or it's going to rain, or what happens if somebody sees you? So it's not as easy as just people having it in front of them and saying, okay, well, we know that, because they know that exercise is good. Anybody out that's listening right now that suffers from poor mental health, right, they know, because their intellectual part of their brain, Sarah, still works. So it's not a case of we become controlled by this part of the brain all the time, right? When people are struggling with mental health, they have some access to this intellectual part, maybe 5% of a day, 95% is in here. So they intellectually, they know that exercise is all right, but trying to actually implement that doesn't work for them because they've got such a low level of serotonin, which is our happy hormone, because they're not going out and doing the things they need to do to increase the levels of serotonin. And something that might help your listeners is to think about what they can do to increase the levels of serotonin, because it's almost a bit like that vicious cycle, right? Energy creates energy. So if we're not doing anything that's involving movement, we're going to end up stuck in that part of our brain that's going to tell us that we're really fatigued and we're really tired, we're really overweight, we're not looking after ourselves properly. Which, when we start to have thoughts about that, we're then in that future or the past, filling that stress bucket. We're away from the present moment. We're away from what I call the now state.
Right.
So something that's really good to think about is, okay, how can I naturally boost serotonin? So for any listeners that are listening, serotonin is the happy hormone. So if anybody's taking antidepressants right now or anti-anxiety tablets, they don't actually give you more serotonin. But what the tablets do is they put little receptors inside your brain, which stops you reabsorbing and peeing back out the serotonin. So it means there's more serotonin in your brain. Now, you might be taking antidepressants and you might still be feeling depressed. So you might still not be doing much movement. But what you need to think about is it's only by starting for you to make the movement that you're going to start to then move towards that step of starting to rewire your brain and make new pathways. So a really easy way to think about it is to ask yourself these questions every morning or every evening, is to think about your 3 Ps. Positive action, positive interaction, which leads to positive thinking.
Right.
What can I do right now that's going to give me positive action? What can I do today that's going to give me positive interaction? Oh, I know I'm feeling really depressed. I don't feel like it. Come on, what did Lyn say on that podcast? I need to force myself to go and get my 3 Ps, because we know, right? We know that it's linked away back to when we were in our cavemen and cavewoman days. Scientists are adamant that there was no medications back then. There was no hospitals to cope with pain. What did they do to get them motivated away back then in order to get them to go out and hunt? Now, I'm not suggesting your listeners start to go out and hunt for their own food or anything like that, or start to self-medicate and self-soothe themselves rather than go to the doctors. But what I am suggesting is it's the same neurotransmitter that away back then they used for motivation and for happiness and for contentment. And we need to strip our brain back to what it was like away back then, because it's actually exactly the same. And what can you be doing today that's going to allow you to be sitting around your campfire positively interacting with people? What's going to allow you to get your positive activity that's going to allow you to go out and do things that make your heart sing? And that is going to help you increase your levels of serotonin, which is going to make you want to move.
That's it, isn't it? And it's this is the thing, is it's very easy to say, if you have a mental health issue, whatever, if you're feeling overwhelmed with stress, or you know that your anxiety is starting to take over, it's very easy to say, go and do some activity. But when you're in the grip of those emotions, it's very hard to actually do it. And it's something I always say to people, is start where you are. And I think people have very unrealistic expectations. So they sort of think, oh, right, I'll do an hour's yoga class, I'll go to the gym for an hour. Whereas if you're doing nothing, then 5 minutes is where you are now, not an hour. An hour is going to be just insurmountable, particularly if you've got to go somewhere, you've got to actually get there. Then you've got to do the session, or you might have to get changed, and then you've got to come back. And actually that might be 2 hours. And it's just overwhelming, and being around other people. Whereas just going for walking to the end of the garden or back, or walking to the end of your road and back, might well just be enough that you go, I did that. And this is again where you might not get the interaction that you need initially, but you can get the positive thinking, which is, well, I did that.
Absolutely. Of course you can. And absolutely. And then people, once they start to get outside and start to do little bits, then they might start to notice that they even wave to their next door neighbour that they wouldn't have done, and that starts to give them their positive interaction. It's tiny, tiny little steps, but I know that it's something that just keep that in your mind. Energy creates energy, and I get it when we're feeling depressed and anxious, and I've been in that place. We just want to stay indoors, and we want to stay in our comfortable place. But you're never ever going to start to break that cycle from stuck stress, anxiety, depression, OCD, bulimia, whatever it's showing up for you right now, unless you're able to actually start to go right down to the basics. And the simple basics of even moving your body for 5 minutes is going to start to get that serotonin increasing in your bloodstream.
It's really, really interesting, actually, because saying energy creates energy. And I think sometimes it's very, very easy to confuse emotional fatigue with physical fatigue. People will say, I'm too tired. I don't have the energy. I'm too fatigued. And sometimes we are emotionally fatigued and tired. And we don't recognize that actually going and moving, our body needs that movement. We're not as physically tired as we are emotionally. And just going out there and moving creates that energy. It creates a sense of, actually, I feel better for that. So because we physically move, we physically feel better. And that translates into an emotional, energizing experience as well. It's like, oh, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought.
Absolutely.
It's so important, isn't it, to recognize that sometimes our fatigue is emotional and our bodies are crying out for movement, but we confuse the two. And people say, oh, but I'm already tired. If I exercise, I'll be more tired. It's like, well, then don't exercise. Just move. Just do a few minutes of movement. That will energize you. Move to the point where you feel energized and then stop. And then the next day, move to the point where you feel energized and stop. That process of moving more, going from 5 minutes to 50 minutes, might take you a couple of months. But you have to start somewhere. And if you start today, then in 2 months' time, you'll be further along. If you keep putting it off, then in 2 months' time, 2 years' time, you'll still be in the same place. And I think this is where the expectation is, I'm going to have to go and get sweaty and hot and red and uncomfortable and be in pain. Whereas actually, no, just going for a short walk, just sitting outside sometimes in the sunshine might actually be enough as the first step.
Yeah.
Don't you think? It's bringing it, like, again, it's bringing it right back to, okay, what's the least I can do to feel a bit better, rather than what's the most.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? And it's so important, isn't it? So what can people do then when they are in this pattern and it is hard it's very easy for us to say, go and move, you'll feel better. But it's not easy when you're in that stuck pattern, is it? So what can people do?
Of course it's not. Absolutely. I think the best thing for people to do is to really look at it and ask themselves, like, what is it they're looking to get for their outcome? Like, what is it they're looking at right now? Do they want support for their mental health, or do they want to join an exercise class, or what can they do to try and find somebody to support them? Because when you're in that place with your mental health, it's a really, really dark and lonely place. And you look at yourself and you think it's only you that's feeling like this, but actually you realise soon that, like, your next door neighbour or people around about you are all feeling exactly the same. So I think for me, getting support and accountability, like I say, whether that be from somebody like myself as a mental health expert, or whether it be joining a gym, or whether it be joining up and doing something like a singing class, I think getting yourself out there and starting to make the steps towards being with like-minded people is so important.
And there's I can guarantee, wherever anybody lives in the UK or anywhere in the world, there will be so many more opportunities for activity, for social connection than you realise. It is just a question of you might need to do a little bit of research and find out where they are, or ask around. But even things like, Walking for Health, Paths for All, Steps for Health, but they're called various things, but little walking groups. They're half-hour walks, and it's a stroll. It's not a fitness walk. It's not a hike or a ramble. It is just a stroll. And again, it's like-minded people. It's people who want and need to just get out, just be around other people, and just enjoy nature and things like that. There's always more out there, isn't there? And that might be your first step. Your first step might not be going outside and being active. Your first step might be to find something that you think, I could do that. That sounds like a good thing for me. Mightn't it?
Very true, very true. And I think often, like, my experience as well is that people often, when they've got, like, especially anxiety or OCD, when their minds is constantly on the go all the time, and when they then go out to try and do something like go for a walk, like people's like, go for a walk and enjoy, look up and enjoy the sunshine and look at the trees, but their minds are so consumed with worries and judgments and thoughts and catastrophizations and intrusive thoughts that they end up going out for a walk, and it causes them even more stress. So one of the things that I think is amazing, and that's something that I teach, is eyes open meditation, because meditation is something that, as much as it's not about activity and actually moving the body, almost in a way, because it teaches you how to manage your mind and manage your voice inside your head, it allows you then that space to then have that room to want to go out and go for a walk. Because I'll often people, like, and the amount of people that I'll see online, or people will come and say, oh, we've been told by our GP we need to book a cruise to go on holiday because I'm suffering from stress. People actually then go on the holiday, Sarah, and actually, because they're taking that crazy voice with them, that crazy lady's on their shoulder, and they're not relaxing because they're chattering to that crazy lady inside their head, and they're in the future and the past. They're thinking about what's going on back home and what their kids are doing and how many emails they've got and how they're going to make their next £500 or £5 million. So people often, everyone's got the wrong understanding about how we start to manage our mental health, because it starts with managing this inside our head and our thoughts, which then allows us to be able to go out for a walk and relax, or go to the gym and relax, or go on holiday and lie in a sun lounger and recognise what peace and contentment is.
That's it. There's no point in going on a cruise if you take all your baggage with you, including the emotional stuff is there. But it's I actually do frequently. I've got a 14-minute walking meditation from somebody, and I'll pop my headphones in and listen to that, and it's absolutely lovely because I'm just observing and listening and looking, and it really helps. And I think
guided meditation.
People think of relaxation and meditation as lying down, eyes closed, think beautiful thoughts, and for a lot of people that stresses them out. It's like, I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? Why can't I empty my mind? And I think relaxation and meditation, where you're doing something, is a good start, because it just stops that chatter and you're focusing on something, whether it's walking, whether it's just watching a tree in the wind, and all sorts of things. And this is where I think it's so important to find what works for you, isn't it? Rather than...
Absolutely. And I think when people, again, though, it's like the way I kind of teach meditation is, in the beginning when I'm working with clients, I don't even tell them it is meditation, because I don't think a lot of people are ready, still, as much as it's becoming a lot more kind of like, the world is changing massively, but a lot of the people are not consciously aware enough yet. They've not got enough intellectual mind control to take on board exactly what meditation is. So some of your listeners that are right in that place right now of negativity and fear and anxiety and stress, which I've been in, so this comes from no judgment, when they're hearing you saying there that you put on a walking meditation and you look at the wind and the trees, and their mind will be going to them, is she having a laugh? Like, there is no way that that's going to help me, and I'm way too far gone for that. And like, why am I like, I'm not even listening to this podcast anymore, because their brain's looking for negative things. Their brain's looking for negative things. Look at all the drama yesterday in regards to Marks and Spencer's advert on Instagram, right? Like, prime example of how the world right now, and a lot of your listeners are the same, have lost intellectual mind control, and this primitive part of their brain's taken over. So they can see a Christmas advert and all they see is the bad in it. And it's about training people, if they want to manage their mental health, they need to switch the seesaw. And yes, they're going to have 5% in this part of their brain, but they need to be operating 95% from this intellectual part of their brain.
Being a bit more rational, a bit more questioning sometimes as well. And it's...
it's the positive part of the brain. It's the part that looks at any situation and comes up with a proper assessment, a positive assessment. It's the part that doesn't get stressed, because there's no reason to get stressed.
Yes.
Because stress is something that's subjective. Stress is something that we bring on ourselves. It's like you said in the beginning. And I don't know whether I would agree when you said that we need some kind of levels of stress, right? I know what you mean in regards to the fact that stress gives us energy, right? So when we start to get cortisol moving through our body, because that's what stress is, we need a certain amount of it. But as a mental health expert, and in my experience of how I manage my life now I've got 4 kids, I'm a single mom, I've got a business, I've got 2 dogs, right? My life is really, really busy. My life has stress in it, right? Because I've got a busy life and I've got kids and teenagers, but the stress doesn't affect me. So that's the biggest difference. Like, stress is okay, when it's subjective and it's not bothering us. But the minute we're starting to feel stress as a negative, that's when we need to start looking at and doing something about it.
That's it. And I think I was thinking more like if you've got an exam coming up, then a certain amount of stress just gives you a little bit of energy to get through it. If we didn't have that, if you're just like, oh yeah, I've got an exam and yeah, it'll be fine, I can't be bothered really to revise. But it's that management of it, isn't it? It's saying, right, okay, I've got this coming up, I'm a little bit anxious, how can I reduce that anxiety? I know, I'll revise, I'll go over my notes, I'll make sure I'm prepared for it. So it's that positive, taking that positive spin on it and saying, right, okay, I need to be prepared for this. And I think it's the same with a lot of things. Like I say, if for a lot of people, they'll think about exercise, they'll think about that sort of thing, and they'll immediately think, oh, it's going to be too much, I won't be able to do it, I won't be able to keep up, rather than, okay, what's the least I can do today just to move my body a little bit? And I think we need to get back to start where you are. And if you're doing nothing, then just standing up a little bit more or just stretching a couple of muscles is going to be a start. And it is that, isn't it, with anything to do with mental health? You know, you're not going to get better overnight. You're not going to learn to cope overnight. It's a process. It's a progression, and it's not linear.
Absolutely,
it's not linear either, is it?
Absolutely. But that unfortunately, that limbic primitive part of the brain, as well as being negative and obsessional, it's not patient, right? Because it's used to being really, really responsive, and it's used to things happening right here, right now, because it's there to keep you alive. So it's a bit like people when they're overeating, right? And that whole emotional eating. When people are in that part of their brain, that's where it comes from, because they're used to just having food and obviously eating it really, really quickly. So people often then think, oh, I want to start exercising and I want to start moving my body, so I want to be doing 5 gym classes a week. Now, like, that part of the brain's telling them that they can manage that, but actually it's not realistic. So the first minute they then cancel a class or they hurt their back and they can't go back, that voice inside their head, because it's negative and obsessional, and it's not coming up with new intellectual ideas, is saying to them, you failed, you're a failure. But if they start to understand how they rewire their brain to the intellectual part, by learning solution-focused techniques and rapid relief techniques, they then are in that headspace that they can't go to the gym one day. That's fine, I'm all right about it.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? It's managing expectations as well as emotions and things like that. And it's one of the reasons I rarely set goals with people in the early stages when they're starting to become more active. They'll sort of say, what should my goals be? And I went, why do you want goals at the moment? Let's just get you enjoying it. Let's just get you doing something. Let's get you finding something that you think you want to keep doing, and then if necessary, I'm all for the let's move for the sheer enjoyment of moving. Let's not start putting goals. And if you've got anxiety or stress or OCD or anything, as you said, you've probably got enough pressures on you already. Let's not add more. So how do you manage your own?
How do I manage my own stress and anxiety?
Well, activity levels around things.
Oh, activity level you're going to ask. I was going to say, just by following the same premise. I am obviously really lucky about having 4 kids and having the dogs, that like being outside and being quite active is obviously a normal part of my life. But interestingly, a way back, like I had COVID a couple of years ago and I had the most awful fatigue after it, and my GP kept saying to me, it's your anxiety coming back. And I was like, no, you don't understand, right? I'm telling you, right? Like, I've not had anxiety for 10 years. I use my tools and techniques. I walk, I eat, I sleep, I breathe it, right? I know the difference. And it was so amazing to see how a GP's response is, oh, right, you're fatigued, you're tired, so here, you need to go back on antidepressants, right? And actually, no, I don't. So I went through a long journey with them saying it was maybe long COVID. And I got to the stage, Sarah, when I was like, do you know what? They're not keeping telling me this. They're not telling me that I've got long COVID. I'm not becoming one of these people that gets told that they've got fibromyalgia. And before you realise that you've got this label on yourself. So I made a commitment to myself to start doing some exercise every single day, because of the whole analogy, energy creates energy. Now, as experts, we're so good to have I know every single thing, like you probably do, about like exercise and nutrition, as I do about mental health, but we're often not the best ones at following on through our own advice. So I was like, right, okay, I'm adamant that I'm going to start every single day, energy creates energy, whatever that looks like, right? Whether it's having really great sex with my partner, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's going and doing a 10-minute stretch on the floor, whether it's going in my hot tub and just sitting in there and hugging my knees to my chest and stretching my body out, right? Whatever it's going to look like, I'm going to start moving my body every day. And I started off doing it really, really gradually. And so some days I would do a body balance class at the gym. Some days I might go and do a CrossFit. Like, I don't have a schedule. It's about just how I feel on the day. And it's been marvellous. It's been really, really marvellous for me in regards to keeping up my levels of serotonin and getting myself moving again.
Do you think then, and this would be a kind of really good point to finish on, do you think that we need, both from managing our mental health, but also our physical health, we need to listen much more to what our bodies are saying? This is what I need today. And also when they're saying, no, that's not what I need today. I do not want to go and do a CrossFit class today. What today I want to do is something a lot more gentle, a lot more simple, a lot shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's about people, it's about us starting to tune in and listen to what voice we're hearing, because if we're in our intellectual part of our brain, and that's where all our neural connections are, and we're hearing that voice. So if I get that voice inside my head that says to me, oh, you've got too much work to do today, Lyn, you don't bother going and doing a gym class, right? I'm able to recognise that that's the intellectual, positive, conscious part of my brain that's saying that. But what starts to happen when we're in that cycle of stuck anxiety and depression, where it's that negative, it's that fearful, it's that subconscious voice that's coming up. So again, it's easy to say to your listeners, you need to start really tuning into what your body and your mind tells you, because sometimes it can be that primitive, negative, fearful, anxious part of your brain that's saying, don't bother going to the gym. And I think that's when people need to start understanding the difference between normal stress and anxiety, when you're in intellectual mind control that doesn't bother you, and stuck stress and anxiety when you're listening to that negative voice. Because if you keep listening to your body and your mind, and at the minute you're not able to tune into that conscious, if you like, light that's inside of yourself, you're not listening to that true part of you, you're listening to that negative part, and you'll never ever get anything done.
So again, it's a gradual process rather than, waking up tomorrow and saying,
unfortunately, Sarah, it is. Unfortunately, it is. And I think people think that they're going to wake up one day and click their fingers and all of a sudden their mental health or their bodies and they're going to be back. It's not about that. It's not about that. I think it took me probably when I then realised what was working for me in regards to managing my anxiety and all the things that I had going on, and started using all these solution-focused tools and techniques. I think it took me 12 months before I started having days when I was like, wow, I'm actually starting to feel a little bit better here. And then it was maybe 18 months, 2 years before I was in that place when I was back in tune with that true part of me.
This has been really interesting, actually, because it's really, it's given me a lot to think about with, there are days where I'm just not in the activity mood, and it's made me think maybe I need to just question, hang on a minute, which part of my brain's telling me this?
Exactly. And that's a great way to think about it, because if it's your intellectual brain, it's a bit like, I often say this to the girls inside my membership, right? Some days it's okay to go and lie in front of the telly and watch Netflix and eat 2 bars of chocolate. But that's okay if it's your intellectual brain that's telling you that, right? It's not okay if it's that part of your brain that's saying, just do that today, cancel going out with your friends, don't bother going to the gym, and just hide away.
Yeah.
So it's about starting to tune in to which part of your brain you're listening from. And absolutely, if it's your intellectual mind telling you not to go, then that's fine. But if it's your primitive part of your brain, then that's when you need to start leaning in, and you need to start thinking, okay, Wonder Woman's in charge here. This part of my brain is not this crazy lady that's going to be like, no, don't bother.
Yeah, it's there's a difference, isn't there, between, I can't be bothered and it's not the right thing for me today.
Massive difference. But when we're stuck, when our stress buckets are so full that this part of the brain seems like it is us, we can't recognise that there's a difference. So we think that this negative voice is us. We think this is where we operate from. And it's about starting to get that distance and recognising there is 2 parts to you.
Brilliant. Lyn, thank you so much for coming on. It's, as I say, it's something I think a lot of people...
Thank you for having me.
They get, a lot of people don't necessarily understand where their feelings are coming from, and it just hopefully will inspire people to just pause and think and find out more as well. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you do?
Absolutely. Well, they can either find me on Facebook, or on Instagram or TikTok. I am Lyn Penman, the mental health expert. So my TikTok and Instagrams are just at the mental health expert. And I've got a membership that's got a free 30-day trial that's got yoga for anxiety in it, and we do somatic sessions, and I'm in there always doing a lot of stuff. There's lots and lots of information in there as well, Sarah. So I'm sure you'll share the links if anybody wants to,
I will share
to come and do that. And indeed, if anybody wants to reach out to me, then my inbox is always open.
I will share all the links, and also a link to if anybody who wants to buy your book as well, because that might be a good place for people.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
forgot about that
Now Step. Yeah, I remember that. Lyn, thank you so much. You've been listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guest this week, Lyn Penman. Don't forget to subscribe, leave me a review, and we will be back soon with more about creating active lives. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.